heard from S&T, and we've heard from CISA, and now the next part of this is we also want to provide an industry perspective, just one perspective. But we have Demetrius Davis from the MITRE Corporation here. He's a principal systems engineer with supporting federal and DoD enterprise mobility initiatives and organizations, specializing in mobile security, policy, security, and acquisition. He's also a department chief engineer in the MITRE Systems Engineering Technical Center, responsible for strategy, outreach, technical quality, and independent research initiatives for a 50-person technical staff. So I'll ask Demetrius to come to the stage.
Let me take a second and write down, never follow Robert Dew and Kevin Briggs again. So, awesome. Before I get started, I wanted to thank Megan and Vince and the rest of the S&T for the invitation. A great opportunity to get out of DC for a little while, come up and visit our friends up at Bedford. We have some folks in the area, so thank you for that. To get started, I think I have the clicker, okay. I'll jump straight into it. I'll try not to cover much of the ground. We had a master class in 5G earlier, so I don't want to retread a lot of that, so I'll try to skate across some of the things that have already been touched on and get to new material. So real quickly, my name is Demetrius Davis of MITRE Corporation, roughly about 8,500 employees. We're a not-for-profit company. For those that may not know, we operate FFRDCs, about 7 of them in particular. One of them is for DHS, so that's one of our links to DHS. Got a whole bunch of talking points. I'm spraying a target because I didn't know exactly what would be covered before I got up, so now I have a good idea. I'll make adjustments as we go. A little bit of everything here. I'll see, I have a copy here locally. We'll touch on just a little background, not too much, because I think we all know. If we didn't know before, we know now. Touch on a little bit of the architectural elements that are a part of 5G. Security implications, definitely want to touch on that. We already have heard a lot about network slicing, so I might skate over that one really quickly. We've been introduced to some of the heterogeneous networks, so we'll just kind of introduce some of the use cases and how it applies across the different type of networking environments, from personal area networks all the way up through a wide area implementations. And then one area I think we've been talking around, but we didn't really get into a standards discussion. We've been touching on what's happening with 3GPP and ADIS, but I think we have a couple slides on that, and to speak to specifically what are those security features that 3GPP is proposing and looking at, and see if we're mitigating some of those issues that we had in the 4G world. Some of the things we have to live with and carry forward, we'll solve that another day, but we have a lot of those issues that are really being addressed in the next 2 releases. And closing out with a couple of the MITRE 5G activities that are going on that's related to 5G. After that, if we have any more time, I have a to-do list of things that within the security community we really need to look at, more specifically within the government community, because I think the government has special needs, specific DoD and DHS type organizations that we probably need to convene. We have some working groups who are standing up with the ADISs and other consortiums around the Beltway, as I would say, to be able to try to address some of those issues that commercial industry really doesn't care about. So we'll try to see if we can produce some type of layered defense mechanism, because we use a term called defense in depth, right? So when we talk about things like 5G, we have to realize it's not just a comms layer. It's a lot bigger conversation. It's an ecosystem. It goes from devices all the way back to the cloud. So how do we, even within there, we have credentials, we have identity management, we have a lot of different services. And each one of those typically brings its own vulnerabilities. So much like we've been touching on some of the questions and more so in the speakers, we've been hearing that this is a complex system that we have to kind of come up with new strategies and techniques for trying to mitigate some of these challenges. I promise not to spend as much time on the talking point slide next time. So yeah, this is just a pictorial that kind of tells you that 5G is more than just comms, at least the world that I come from. I mean, a lot of times when people say it, some people come at it from different angles. It's a very big elephant. So some people may come at it from layer 1. So if you're talking spectral efficiency, if you're talking SINR like we heard earlier on, you're coming at it from a RF layer, that's fine. But some people are coming at it from a business objective. What type of outcomes can I expect? How would I pay for it? How do I buy 5G? Is it going to be extra? Is it going to be an additional service? I got to buy new phones. So some people are coming at it from an acquisition, business perspective. Some people looking at it from an application developer's perspective. What do I have to write my apps any different? What type of libraries do I got to write to be able to take advantage of low latency? So everyone's looking at this really big elephant from different angles. But one thing we do know is that the user is thinking that, man, whenever all these wonderful technologies come together, it's going to be something special. We've been singing in all of our sci-fi movies, and honestly, the way we look at it is 5G is really more than just the comms piece. It's really how all this AI stuff and machine learning and all the pervasive and immersive technologies, how did that all come together for the public safety folks, for the vehicle to everything. I want my car to talk to my refrigerator and get my coffee cooking going as soon as I get my garage door to open. And for some reason, we associate all this with this 5G era. I'm not sure why. You don't really need 5G to make all that happen. And more specifically, within the IT conversation, most of IT capabilities are available today. But some people are still waiting for 5G to come to their town so I can do IoT. I'm trying to tell people you don't have to wait. It's available. You can go build it today. But for some reason, 5G has become this catch-all buzzword, which sort of represents this new era in technology. So what you have is all your users are waiting. They're all dressed and ready for this big party to start, but not realizing behind this wall or behind the curtain, there are a whole lot of administrators and cyber folks that are trying to figure out how do I address all of these complex challenges that are coming down the pike. So as much as we talk about, hey, I want to be able to have a phone, or I want to have some type of beam that follows me around as I walk through Central Park, we got to realize that behind that comes a whole bunch of work. And we got to realize that threats that are coming in, because a lot of this stuff is now being done in the software realm. And for some reason, and I'm a software person, so I'm biased, but for some reason, there's a belief that the more software you put into a system, the more someone can affect it, as if hardware is infallible, but that's a conversation for another day. So one of the things we're seeing is how do we keep those threats under some type of control? And I guess the last question was, what are you going to do to try to stop all these different threat vectors and all these threat actors that are threatening all of these prized parts of our infrastructure? And the reality is, the short answer is, we have to learn how to do risk management. And that's a very nasty word. We talk about it. We have a risk management framework within the government that we're being encouraged to apply. But the reality is, it's really hard to sit down and walk through your entire ecosystem and identify all the things you care about and prioritize what things you want to take care of and what things are you willing to sacrifice for a cost, and to be at a cost and rank everything. And that's a very difficult activity. So it's hard to secure everything. And one of the things I do on the side is to try to figure out what type of soft defense mechanisms can we apply. Can we try trust modeling? Can we do some type of deception? What else can we do to help with the IDSs and firewalls and antiviruses and all the other things we deploy to secure our infrastructures? So those are techniques that we're going to have to become more versed in, to try to figure out, how do I trick? How do I deter? How do I delay to buy me some time to figure out where the threat is really coming from? And so those are some real challenges that we're going to have to deal with, and we don't have them today. Even though the party is starting. We're starting to hear the music, we're starting to hear the hype, and the momentum is building, people are ready to deploy applications, and we haven't gotten everything quite ready for the party yet. So we got to pick up the pace in some ways and try to be able to come up with strategies that can be able to help all this wonderful future hyper-connected era activities to be able to go off without too much of a hitch. I'm definitely not going to spend any time on here, but this real quick point is to let you know that, this looks like we took a straight line from 1G to 4G to 5G, and it really wasn't that way. I just wanted to let you know that it was a bit of scattershot in the early years. But when we got around 3G, ITU really sort of stepped up as being the bell cow that sort of pulled all of our standards and our requirements together. And since then, it's sort of been escorting us through the 4G and into the 5G era. So now we have one sheet of music that everyone's kind of working from in a standards perspective. And so we'll touch on some of those. But just in a nutshell, we got the 3 major use cases I believe was touched on earlier. So we'll just maybe allude to that lightly in the future. Yeah, I'm going to skate through some of these just because I feel like as I say, we had a master class, so don't need to recap a lot of it. But one of the big challenges here is we're moving from a more static, hardware centric 4G infrastructure. Now we're moving towards a very virtualized, software-intensive core in the 5G era. We're talking more about edge. We didn't talk about edge much on the 4G side. We're talking about virtualization, dynamic configurations. All those things are things of the 5G era, and so those things are necessary to be able to create some of the wonderful scenarios that we're talking about doing in the next few years. So just want you to know that there was a transition. We were able to fix some of the issues that came with the 4G world, but unfortunately, some of those things are going to carry on into the next generation, maybe into 6G. I think we're starting 6G working group meetings, which is scaring the heck out of me, like you got to be kidding. And also even the Release 17 type of activity, it seems like some of the stuff is more science fiction than reality, but we got to get ready for it. It's coming over the horizon now. So security implications, I believe we've touched on a lot of these, so I'm trying not to rehash a lot of that ground, but I'll just touch on this notion of 5G being this connectivity, this unifying connectivity fabric for all these other technologies. And so you have, as I said, the AI, the cloud, the edge, the immersive, the technologies, which is your virtual reality, augmented reality. Everyone's thinking, how can I make all this stuff go? I need some fuel to sort of drive all of these technologies. And so we're looking to 5G to sort of solve all of that, even though I don't believe it's really best suited for every use case, but for right now, we're just using it as a catch-all term for those that don't really understand the differences. So we'll just keep the conversation moving forward. We've got to realize that with this increased connectivity, you're creating more of a complex system. So as you get more systems, you get more threats, you get more cyber attacks. And so we have to deal with botnets on our phones in the future. We've got to deal with, how do I deal with devices being added to the network without the admin knowing about it? It's something we have to do on the fly. So that automatic provisioning, how much you're going to automate and let some software decide what is secure and not secure versus having a person do it. So we got a lot of issues that we got to address, and I'm not trying to pile on and let you know, oh my God, you should be afraid and we're not going to move forward. I just want you to let you know there are some particular security challenges that we have to address, and I think we have some smart people working on it, so we have some good hope in believing that we're going to be able to beat this. We mentioned that the infrastructure be heavily virtualized, which brings its own issues. I think in some cases, there's a belief that even with something like a network slicing, hey, it's basically like VPNs, right? We can just chop it up and pass it out and let people run their own little, networks however they want to. It's going to be their own ownership models. They can have their own QoS. It can be just like, the old days. Nothing's different, but we got to realize that there are a lot more nuances to this, and you just can't just automatically translate one technology for another. So there's going to be some new software, some new terms, some of this stuff is going to be a little custom. Even though we're using standards, and a lot of the standards are really life-saving, because in some way, I can think of a generation ago, everything was, custom built. I come from doing Raspberry Pis, right? So IoT a few years ago was, hey, I got 3 Raspberry Pis that are talking together, and I'm using it to feed my dog when I'm not at home. So it's grown up quite a bit in a few years. So now we got to look at all the possible ways you can get these systems to act and to be able to sense and to be able to work together without necessarily me sitting there pushing buttons and flipping switches. It's a different way of thinking, so it's going to also trigger a different way of defending as well. And supply chain, and I know we've touched on this, but supply chain is a much bigger issue than let me pull the thread on the hardware to figure out all the way back to where the rare earth was getting pulled out the ground. So that lets me know that the supply chain is clean. And that used to be, at least from my opinion, that's what supply chain really was. Find out where all the pieces come from and who built them, whether it's done in an ethical fashion. Do we have 12-year-olds in mines? Is that a problem? From a business point of view, you probably don't care, but it does trigger some other issues. So that's the technical or the technology supply chain, but there's also a service supply chain. So one of the things we're seeing overseas, and I think it was touched on lightly in the last conversation, in the last presentation, and that is if I go overseas and I use a foreign carrier network, and I'm buying a service from a provider who is not banned or considered non-compliant, but they have a contract with someone who has a contract with someone who has a contract who uses non-compliant software. So now we have a service supply chain where now I got to say every service I buy, I got to follow that little thread of, to figure out who all they get their suppliers from, not just the hardware, not just the software, but it's also the service contracts. And so now the question is, this is something Department of Commerce is dealing with every day to say, okay, this guidance went out, but now how far does it go? How many hops into the network do I have to go before I can sleep at night knowing that I'm secure, whatever secure really means? So supply chain has sort of opened up some second and third order effects that we now have to look at a little differently than just knowing that it's a clean technology supply chain. There's a little bit more to it. I think we've touched on this even a little bit, but this just sort of shows some of the challenges we see in the RAN side of the equation. So in some cases, you can have a rogue base station. I think someone even had a question on it, saying, if you have an MC catcher, and how will you deal with that today versus how we envision doing it in the future? So you can have an unsecure phone or end user device and a base station. And so right now there's a ways that you can say, hey, the person sticks the base station in there, you don't know who you're connected to exactly. And so there are some changes we can make here, whether it's, adding some type of key management construct or creating some type of enhanced base station technology so that you can be able to verify that I am you, you are me before we make a hard connection and start passing information. So this just shows one way of doing it. There's different ways. 3GPP is also looking at that. This was actually part of one of the MITRE contributions to the last 3GPP SA3 session. I think I have a slide on that somewhere. I might get to it in a second or two. This is a recap of the network slicing. I feel like I'm skating through a lot of this because I feel like we've already been schooled on it very well. So don't want to go into it very deeply. Anything I want to touch on here? No, I think we've been, actually that slide looks almost just like the slide from earlier. So I'll keep moving. So here, this is just one depiction of how the world might look, right? Depending on which side of the world you're on. I'm on the side that may look at, okay, I'm an application developer, or I have a use case that I want to address. I got to figure out, okay, for what I want to do, I got to map that to what type of environment I'm going to be working in. So am I in the building, am I outside the building? Am I in a personal area network, or am I doing something that's very specialized? So something like telesurgery, that's going to say, oh my gosh, I need to make sure I have low latency. So that tells you, boom, I need to be considering something like a 5G. So this sort of tells you 5G has a role in a lot of different places. I think there's some battlegrounds we're going to see somewhere, especially in the building. I personally don't believe Wi-Fi is totally dead yet. I think there's going to be, especially a Wi-Fi 6 and WPA3 coming out. I think it's going to be an interesting battle here on the in-building sector. But once you get into the wide area environments, I think it's pretty much going to be a 5G, even though when we talk about IoT, we also got to realize that IoT is not just one thing either. So there's massive IoT, which may be dealing with a lot of low power, a lot of, maybe a narrowband IoT solution may work for you. If you don't need to have wireless webcams sitting somewhere collecting high-res video, then you might be able to get by with a narrowband IoT solution. But it can still tie into the 5G fabric, and you can still move forward. So just let you know there's different ways of slicing this. So this is just one way of slicing it. I believe that on the personal area network piece, I think there's going to be some interesting activity there too. I mean, we always break this up in 802's category, right? 802.11 and 15. So I think this is just one way of looking at it from a use case point of view and slice the pie according to where is the cell technology best applied. Okay, maybe I'm pushing it wrong. Oh, okay, now I guess so. This one I definitely don't have to touch on because I think we've analyzed, as you look at the 3 different use cases, we've kind of drew it on a spider chart a bit to kind of show you where they're best used. So as we did in the last case, on the last slide, we looked at, okay, for a given cellular solution, it may work well in a wide area environment. Well, so here in the case, you may look at it and say, for whatever I may need from all these different abilities and attributes, depending on what I want out of it, it may tell me what type of use case I want to apply. So when we step into 5G, at least the first generation, we're going to see mostly a broadband type of approach. We're We won't get really into the ultra, low latency stuff until maybe at least that's the stuff in release 16 is probably spill over into release 17. Oh, wow, time moves quick up here. Okay, maybe it's Boston. So I'm just showing you that, depending on what you're looking for, it may tell you what type of use case you may want to consider. Standards, really quickly, I can touch on this really quickly. One of the things about network slicing, I think we think that's going to be that and beamforming are two of the most popular features that we typically hear about when we talk about 5G. But one of the keys to that is you probably have to realize you have to have a true 5G core to make that happen. And so one of the things we learned coming out of release 15 is there's two different architectures that we're going to probably promote, which is a standalone and non-standalone. So you got to have really a 5G standalone architecture to really make the network slicing happen. And so that's some of the things that's been bandied about, and believe me, it's not a pretty place to be. I went out to Reno back, I guess, in the spring. I like to take advantage of any time something is happening in the country, so I don't travel all around the world to attend all these working group sessions. But there's a pretty good body of work. There's SA3 work, which is mostly security centered. And there's also a separate, 5 or 6 different RAN working groups. So, we're working through ADIS to try to, make sure we stay engaged with some of those 3GPP activities. Anything else? One of the things we also notice is within the security working group, they don't really spend a lot of time on supply chain. So we realize that may be a second activity we have to do outside of that. So we're setting up individual supply chain working groups with ADIS. Hopefully get those started in the next few weeks. Here are a few of the security features as you move from 4G to 5G. Some are considered optional. We've been trying to make contributions to be able to say, hey, some of these optional features should be considered mandatory. Most of them got rebutted, so we're going to try to see if we can do that at the ADIS level, which is more or less focused on United States and North America type deployments. So as you see here, if we had our choice to be king for a day, we would really want to push getting the MC encryption. In the new generation, we're calling it the SUPI and SUKIs, and new terms we've got to be able to adapt to. These are contributions. And we have a secure profile working group. Actually, our next meeting is the 1st of August. So if anyone's interested, this is an industry and government consortium environment where we can be able to work through some of these 5G security issues together. To-do list, which I'll skip because we're out of time. So I'll just jump to any questions. I'll leave this up just in case it reminds me of something. Yes, any questions? That means I can talk longer. I was just kidding. Awesome, we're up against a break, right? So. Well, thank you very much.